Hello and welcome to windy West Sussex. So today I'm going to take you for a walk up to Cissbury Ring, and in this video I'm going to discuss some of my thoughts on the hill forts or monuments that we have on the tops of the hills in this area. So we're going to head up through this gate up to Cissbury Ring, and then I'll talk a little bit more up there. So I've just climbed up the hill, and then we've just got to head on up these steps and over the ring itself. Now, the reason I've brought you up through this way to access the ring is this is a very popular way to get to Cissbury Ring. It's probably the quickest way to get there. So popular that we've even got concrete steps taking us to the ring. So here we can see the shape of the ditch and bank, or henge as it would be called. So this would be the outer ring here with the higher ring there. So let's just get up on the top of the ring using these steps to get a better perspective. So as we get to the top, viewers may not know this, but all of my YouTube identity is based off of this particular tree, and the reason that I chose this tree is it's perched on the side of the ring and it's flourishing, and it combines nature and man, and that I think really is my memento for this channel, is that we should enjoy nature and respect it, and the two should work together. So we have the tree and the bench, so the two show how we're intertwined essentially. So it's not just me that thinks that this tree is a special place. As we can see up here, a little fairy house or bird house popped in there. And then if we look down here, we can see some memories and a little fairy door. So obviously some people think that fairies live here. So this place is special to me because not only does it have a hill fort or a henge or a ring, we also have these what possibly could be burial mounds. They also could be spoil pits for mining as well. As we can see, quite a large divot taken out of this one. So I'm hoping you can hear me okay. I have got the microphone plugged in and down inside my t-shirt so the wind cannot get it too much. But here we find what I would say is the centre of the ring. We have this little gap here in all of the gorse. Now, gorse is commonly found when we get to these structures, but gorse is also linked to ring forts throughout the country. So the Irish have a very different view about ring forts, and you could call this a ring fort, yeah, just to use that terminology. And from here we have spectacular views looking out over Sussex. In the distance we have got Cissbury Ring, and over in that direction that is a little clump of trees on the top of the hill above Chantry. As we swing out over here we can see Black Patch Hill, in the distance behind it Harrow Hill. If we keep spinning round we can see Bignor Hill, the Trundle and Highdown Hill. So like some of these other old structures around the country, like for example Stonehenge, there's a complete network of these structures all within the area, and these hill forts or ring forts or rings are supposedly on like a subway map of energies of the earth called ley lines, and I don't know whether or not they are a thing or not, because I'm not sensitive in that way, but certainly they do seem to lay on these formations of lines across Sussex. So I've done other videos up at Cissbury, but the reason that I brought you here today is that I've been thinking through some of my thoughts about these structures, possibly because I've been to Highdown and also watched the summer solstice at Stonehenge, and the word henge is Old English and it basically denotes the ditch and bank that you find around these circles. And what we've got ahead of us is what would be described as the Eastern Gate. Now, over time the usage of these has changed dramatically, and they call it an Eastern Gate because we're comparing these to cities of a type, and a city would have a north, west and eastern gate of type, so they call it a gate. But in the 1800s, the Victorian age, people would come up here to explore and to picnic, and it's possible that these entrances have been made much newer than when they were in use. And the reason I took you up the other way is that you can see that that is the most common access for this area, and no gate has been made in that. It's also the gate that looks towards Chanctonbury, and Chanctonbury would be an extremely important structure compared to Cissbury being the nearest one. So commonplace history speculates that people lived here and they would live within the ring, and so if that is the case, then obviously you'd want to get to Chanctonbury to have trade, so in theory you'd want a gate there. So I don't think that this formation here is an original gateway or has ever been a gateway. Also, if we go and have a look through here, you'll find that there's doesn't seem to be any kind of really good access. This, if you were going to the efforts of making such a massive structure, I mean, as we get closer you can see how high these banks are and how much effort would have been involved in creating these banks and also the ditches. And yeah, when you look over here, I mean, there's no obvious, yeah, there is a farmer's track over there, but there's no avenue like there is at Stonehenge that guides you into another monument. And so I think this is a very modern addition to Cissbury Ring. So I'm going to head round this side of the ring just to try and escape the wind, because it is extremely strong, and not many people up here today. as a result of it, which is advantageous for me because it means I can have the place to myself to film. And yeah, coming around this side, you can see how big the banking is and also the ditch in there. So I'm just going to compare this to some of the other structures that were made at this. I mean, they're saying that this is 3,500 years old roughly, but to be honest, nobody's going to know. All we're going to do is be able to dig things out of the inside of this or around it and carbon date things like animal bones or wood, but we don't know when they were placed there. Certainly these could be much older than 3,500. But if we look around the world, there's some interesting people you can find on YouTube, like Michael Tellinger, and he does a lot of videos about South Africa and Adam's calendar, which is basically like a Stonehenge for Africa. But beyond that, he's documented 2,000 stone circles in Africa alone. So these circular formations seem to be a very old structure across planet Earth, and the ones in South Africa are basically stones stacked up, but we don't have any natural stones in this particular area. It's all chalkland and flints. So these ditches and banks are made of stacked flints. You're not going to see the stone structures you would see, say for example in Ireland or Orkney or Scotland, where they have outcrops of granite and limestone, where they'll collect those stones and create structures from there. So this is just an adaptation of those things for Sussex. So in one of my recent videos I went to Fishbourne Roman Palace, and the thought came to me about that video comparing it to this. So mainstream history will tell you that the reason for the two banks is that this was a fort. So this outer bank here, they're saying that basically you would have a row of trees stacked up on this outer ring, and that would be your first wave of defence. And then we have the ditch here, and the ditch would be so that on the top there you could have another row of wood and logs, and basically if your attackers manage to overcome this ring, they would get trapped in a kill zone right there. Problem is there's not much evidence to support that. There's very little modern excavations of these, because they are so important. Nobody is really allowed to dig into them. There were some excavations of Cissbury back in the 80s due to the storm blowing over a lot of the trees in 1987. But going back to my train of thought with Fishbourne Roman Palace, Fishbourne Roman Palace was built over an older structure, and basically what had happened there is before the palace was put in, there were beamed buildings that were put there, and those beams had basically been chopped off and built over. So if we did have a row of logs or a fence on this outer ring, basically what you would have is lots of rotten tree stumps, because the wood would have rotted away. And what we saw in Fishbourne Roman Palace is that where the wood rotted away, the floor would collapse and you'd have these big holes in the middle of the floor, and it took a long time for that wood to disappear, but it made these huge cavities. And as you can see, these outer banks are still very, very well formed. They obviously have eroded over time, but we haven't got any sinkholes as if there was a fence post. So in this section of Cissbury Ring, we have these large holes in the ground here. So these are supposedly the remains of flint mines, and there are a large amount of archaeological artifacts found in this area, and this area is famous for flint mining, so kind of fits that these are the remains of old flint mines. However, they don't have any holes in them. Now it's possible that they've been filled back up, or it could just be that the people that made all of these holes could be bothered to build massive embankments but couldn't be bothered to dig down deep to get the flints. The other possibility for these is that we know that or we don't know actually, there is speculation that at Chanctonbury there used to be some stones at Chanctonbury, and we do know throughout all of history that when we come across these sites where there are large stones, the stones get removed and then turned into fine houses that we see below. So purely speculation, but could these large holes be the holes where you would have the monoliths like you see at Stonehenge? Certainly, if you were going to have something the size of the stones at Stonehenge, you would have to have massive holes going down into the soil, and these holes here are all on this side of Cissbury Ring. So looking out into the landscape that we see in this direction, Harrow Hill, Black Patch Hill, the Trundle, Bignor Hill, all of these other hill forts. So purely speculation, but maybe they are. So comment down below what you think. So couldn't come to Cissbury Ring without coming to see this spectacular tree. Absolutely epic. Not sure how old this tree is, but obviously not a young one, but not as old as the ring itself, but it's just got such an amazing spread of leaves, and look at the size of the limbs, and it's living in one of the harshest environments on the top of a hill. I mean, how in its hundreds of years it's been here, it hasn't been struck by lightning, is amazing. So going to make our way back to the car. Hope you found this video interesting. Please comment below on some of your thoughts on this subject, and if I could ask you to like and subscribe this video, it will help me to share my content on YouTube. Thanks a lot for watching.